Hello and welcome to another great episode of the Optimize Show. I am David Mamano, your host. Thank you so much for joining. Brand new episode every Wednesday morning, by the way. If you like this, if you love this, help us spread the good word. Today I have on the show a great guest and an old friend. I'm not going to say old, an old friend, Bruce Peters. Bruce, welcome to the Optimize Show.
Oh, thank you, David.
Glad to have you here.
I'm glad we finally can do it because
it
took us a little while to get.
I know. Well, good things come to those who wait, right?
So there you go.
I wanted to have Bruce on the show, everybody. Bruce has been a longtime mentor. What do I call you, my Mr. Miyagi? I don't know if you like this, but my Yoda, even though you're not 700 years old. But known each other for a long time. My sister and your daughter went to high school together. I've known your son. So a long time. You have been a fixture in this community for quite a while.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, like, you're a lawyer, you've been a judge, you've been a business owner. In the past 20 plus years, you've been really a business guide. I like how you call yourself a guide instead of a consultant or whatever. But tell us from the beginning, you came to Rochester and you were a lawyer, right? So just tell us, give us the overview of your journey.
Yeah, jeez. You only have 20 minutes. Yeah,
right.
Yes. It's interesting. I came to Rochester in the early 70s. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at that time, Rochester Kodak had 67,000 employees. Xerox had 33,000 employees. It was incredibly different. But I came here because my wife was from Rochester. And I don't know if I've ever told you the Maxine story, but I was the head resident of the grad dormitory in law school at the University of Illinois. Mm-hmm. And I had a year of being inside the cave as a young student there and with my head down trying to just get enough grades to get by. Mm-hmm. And so at the beginning of the summer, I decided that I'd have a little more fun. Mm-hmm. And so as a head resident of the grad dormitory, there was a women's side back in those days and a men's side in those days. And so I'm checking all of the new students in, particularly paying attention to the young women who were being moved in. Mm-hmm. And I had a list.
Oh my God.
And I actually had a list and I had grades on the list as I moved in and checked them. Yeah, I actually did, which tells you a lot about me. Right. And who walks across the room but Maxine?
Your future wife.
She walks across the room. And I, whoa. And to make a long story a little bit short, I checked her in, I checked her out. Mm-hmm. She came down a little bit later to work on her mailbox. She couldn't figure out the mailbox, so that gave me an opportunity to go over and get to know her a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I invited her out for coffee that night. Mm-hmm. And at the University of Illinois campus, a pretty large campus, and the place to go have coffee was way across the other side of campus, but we walked over there and we got a chance to walk and talk. We get all the way over to the other side of the campus at the coffee place, and of course it's closed. It's a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Walk all the way back. She said, "Do you want to come up to my room?"
Wow. Very forward thinking in the 70s.
Yeah. And I said, well, how can I say no? Right? And so I go up to her room. Now, candidly, I had never had a cup of coffee in my entire life. But she liked coffee, and she made the coffee. We had coffee. And Maxine and I talked that evening till 4 o'clock in the morning and talked till 4 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. We went out every single solitary night for 6 weeks. Wow. And 6 weeks later, I proposed to her and she said yes.
Wow. How to optimize relationship there,
so there you go. So when you know, you know.
When you know, you know. Absolutely.
Sometime. Now my kids, when I tell the kids that story to my kids, my daughter would say, and you know my daughter would say, if we did that to you, right? And so anyway, I had not met Maxine's parents.
Well, thank you, Maxine, for bringing
so there you
are.
So there you are. So that's that part of the story.
Very cool.
But we came to Rochester. In law school, I had studied with a professor in torts and social legislation with a guy by the name of Jeffrey O'Connell. Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey O'Connell was one of the architects of the old no-fault insurance program. And in working with O'Connell, I realized, and we passed the first no-fault legislation in Massachusetts in the early 70s, in the late 60s, early 70s. And I decided that I thought every lawyer should know how to try cases. Mm-hmm. But no-fault insurance was taking away a lot of the litigation back in those days. So if you wanted to be a trial lawyer, you needed to do automobile or defense litigation, matrimonial, or criminal law. And I decided I didn't want to do the other two, so I decided to join a defense litigation firm. And so for the day after I passed the bar here in Rochester, I picked a jury that morning. The value of the case was $1,200. I was in the bathroom all night long throwing up and other things. I was never been more nervous in my life, but I was handed a caseload of 150 cases, and I handled 150 cases, and I was in the courtroom virtually every day for 3 years.
Wow. Yeah.
It was the greatest education and background. I was not particularly good at it, but I sat at the seat of people who were really good at it, so you do little files yourself, and I worked as second fiddle, if you will, for the big files. And I had senior partners who were brilliant in particularly medical malpractice they were doing back in those days. We were on the defense side of medical malpractice. So I learned to do that. And that skill set of inquiry and making sure the facts are correct and all of that stayed with me forever. And you've hung out with me a little bit, and that part of me continues, that first year of law school and all that litigation. And stayed with me and was always valuable. There's good news and bad news about lawyers in the business way. One of the great skills for lawyers is to be able to identify issues and problems. And so if you go take the LSAT exam, the LSAT, the Law School Admissions Test exams, are all designed to figure out, can you find and identify issues and problems? That's the good thing. Lawyers can do that. The bad news about that is lawyers are not trained to solve problems. And so very often the skill set of being in business and being a business lawyer, and like a lot of general rules, it's not, I mean, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but one of the things that always frustrated me as a lawyer was all my partners were good about being pessimists about things, if you will. And I was always looking over the horizon a little bit. And so ultimately, I had to be. I was the managing partner. My firm merged with Phillips Lytle way back in, and I was the co-managing partner for a few years. But I needed to be my own boss because I could not get lawyers to think that way. And so that was the big difference. And so same thing with being a guide in my work today. My job is not to have the answers. It's to have the better questions, but to understand what those questions are to keep peeling away the layers of the onion so to help the clients get there. So
Yeah, that's
so
great.
anyway, that's the Maxine story. And,
Yeah. Well, then you ended up stop being a lawyer and you started your own business, right?
Yeah. So in the late 90s, I had designed a totally paperless process closing system in the mortgage business. So I had 5 offices across the state of New York. I had 150 employees. Every bank in the state of New York was a client, every bank. I was not number 1 for anybody, but I was 2, 3, or 4 for everybody. And candidly, I got bored. And so I went down, I had a big meeting down at Fannie Mae in McLean, Virginia, with oak panel, leather stuffed chairs, where the Federal Reserve was there, the controller of the currency was there, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the agencies that collateralize mortgage loan obligations. And I showed them my closing system. And I was there for 3.5 or 4 hours. And all I heard was all the reasons why nobody wanted to revolutionize the system. I flew back that night. Maxine re-enters the story. We had dinner at the Park Avenue pub. And I said to Maxine, I'm going to sell the business. And she said, why are you going to sell? She said, you love it. You built this thing from scratch. And I said, I listened. I feel a little bit like the man from La Mancha. I'm tilting at a windmill that nobody wants the system fixed. And it's like, I'm going to tilt at this windmill and it's not going to make a difference in anybody's life. And I said, I don't know how much time God's going to have me, let me to have left in the universe, but doing an improved mortgage closing for $400 or $100 isn't going to change anybody's life. So I'm going to sell. Maxine said, yeah, you know Maxine. Maxine said, Bruce, whatever you want. Yeah, okay, fine. So about 2 weeks later, a client, a VP from Kodak, who was a personal client of mine, came in and he's taking early out from Kodak. And John, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm getting into this CEO peer group thing. What the hell is that, John? And he said, well, we get a bunch of CEOs around the table, and I facilitate it, and I'm working for this organization called Tech Worldwide. Mm-hmm. And I said, John, I made a decision to sell my businesses. Would that group be able to help me? He says, I don't know. Mm-hmm. He didn't know, which he was honest with me. I said, well, I don't know either, but I don't have a better solution, but I made a decision, I want to move on, so why don't I join the group and see? Mm-hmm. In those days, so you write a check out for 10 grand and you join. Yeah. I was the most annoying tech group member that God ever invented. Mm-hmm. Probably like you were when you were in a group.
When I was in your group.
Yeah, exactly. So I came to the group, why are you here? And I said, I want to sell my businesses. And it was one of the most unsatisfying days in my life because I listened to some of the dumbest, stupidest things that other people thought I should be doing. Why don't you want to be a lawyer? Why don't you want to do this? And I was making money, cha-ching, cha-ching. This is like people were dying to be able to be bored like I was bored.
Right.
One guy in the room, and I just said, my lawyer training was, thank you very much, what else? Thank you very much, what else? Thank you very much, what else? And so I listened to all this. One guy in the room says to me, Bruce, you never sell this as one business. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get it right away. But I had breakfast with him a couple of weeks later, and I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you see how all the pieces and parts fit together, because I had a title company, I had a marketing consulting company, I had a systems operation, I had all the pieces were all together. Nobody had ever put them together before.
Right.
And so he said, you see how that all fits. If the industry doesn't want it to all fit, if you're going to sell it, you're going to have to break it up. Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Yep.
Now, I might have gotten there, but I got there faster because of him.
Yeah.
He's long since passed away. Wonderful guy. So I broke it up into 5 pieces. 11 months and 1 day later, I was free.
You sold all 5 pieces.
I sold my law firm to 3 different law firms. I sold my marketing consulting company to a consulting company out of Boston. I sold my closing system to a bank in Providence, Rhode Island, the Bank of Providence at that time. Mm-hmm. Sold my title company to a management buyout team. And I had a lot of young kids over there, and I ran into one of them the other day. A secretary who worked for me back in those days is the president of that title company today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
And I was free.
Yeah.
I walked out the door, and I was free. What are you going to do next? Well, I didn't know, but I kind of like this peer group thing. I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next, and I don't counsel anybody else to do this, but my style has always been, I'll jump off the cliff and figure out my way on the way down. Mm-hmm. I don't, when I changed firms, I always had my own practice. There was, somebody told me back in my early days, if you take care of the downside, the top side will take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So you don't have to know all the detail of the downside, but if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, what will I do?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It makes sense to have an understanding of that, right?
Yeah.
And so, well, I'll go try this peer group thing and we'll see what happens. So I went into training for Tech Worldwide.
That's the predecessor to Vistage,
That's
is that
the
right?
predecessor to Vistage today, yes.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story. When Michael Milken bought Tech, he changed the name. And so I went into training, and I came back to Rochester, and I built 2 CEO peer groups here in Rochester faster than anybody had ever done in the history of Tech Worldwide. And you know a couple of my members, and you know a lot of my original group members.
Yeah.
Bill Goodrich at LaChase, Bill Verhaley at FAF, the head of Heidelberg Digital and their partnership with Kodak was in my group. Several other people that you know. It was an unbelievable group. So I built 2 groups, and my phone rang. And I told you a story about my phone ringing before. It was the president of Tech Worldwide then. And he said, Bruce, I want to congratulate you on building 2 groups. He says, you've done that faster than anybody's ever done it. And he said, what did you do and how did you do it? This is like Rochester's the backwater of the universe. Like, how the hell can you do that in Rochester?
Right, yeah.
And He said, would you come out and talk to our board of directors and to our senior team out here about what you did? So they flew me out to San Diego and then later up to Los Angeles, and I explained to them what I had done. And one of the interesting things that I did is I never went back to anybody to talk about what I was doing who knew me as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Just new, fresh faces.
Right. And one of the reasons was because every time I talked to somebody that knew me as a lawyer, could not make the connection. Why didn't I want to do that? Because being a lawyer was such a big thing for other people.
Right, you were pigeonholed.
Yeah. So I just said, I'm just going to go do it and do it independently. Later on, those people all came to me, but now I had credibility in a new role in a new way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I go out to San Diego, and I'm in a room, and they have an idea about a supply chain, about an idea how to build Vistage, later Vistage. And I have a few highlights in my career. This is one of my highlights. They're sitting there, and Michael Milken's a member of his board of directors, and Larry Ellison is a part owner of them. Mm-hmm. They're all sitting around a table in a room, and they have this idea, and the presentation was made by a guy by the name of Dan Barnett, who used to be in Rochester and was the COO at Constellation Brands, had come over from Nestle to help them build their other brands. So Dan Barnett was the COO at Vistage, at Tech, and they put this idea, and then they turned to me, Bruce, what do you think of our idea? Mm-hmm. What do you think my answer was?
It sucks.
Yes. I said, it's about the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I can picture you.
Right?
Yep.
And Dan Barnett, who's a really bright, smart guy, I mean, this is a world-class guy. Dan Barnett gives me something like Naomi gave to me when she was a teenager. If you're so smart, what would you do?
Right, yeah.
And I told them. Mm-hmm. They hired me.
Wow, okay, good.
They said, would you do that for us? Mm-hmm. And it was very urgent. So I had to give up one group here. I kept the one group that you're aware of. Mm-hmm. And they hired me to go around the country to do three things. I'd parachute into a community, let's say Seattle. I'd find and identify organizations that wanted to work with CEOs, chambers of commerce, MBA programs, trade associations, anybody who wanted to hang out in the CEO space. I'd identify what they needed in terms of support and programming. Where were they trying to work with CEOs? Where were they trying to work with businesses? And then I'd find people like me who might want to be facilitators of CEO peer groups. And then I trained them on the process, the marketing and sales process that I had used here in Rochester to build a group. Mm-hmm. I did that for about 5 years. So I traveled all over the world. I built a group in Birmingham, England. I built a group in Netherlands. I built a group in Perth. Mm-hmm. And then I hired a guy in the U.S. by the name of Bruce Corson. I don't know if I ever talked to you about Bruce. Mm-hmm. Bruce was from Chicago, so he and I split the U.S. up. Bruce was a terrific guy. They called us the Bruces, and our title was MDRS, Marketing Development Relationship Specialist was our title inside of then, still Tech Worldwide at that time. And if you shorten that up, it's called Market Doctors, MDRS, so they called us the Market Doctor. Nice. So I did that for about 5 years. Then Maxine passed, and I didn't want to travel like that anymore. And Michael Milken bought the company. And I have a Michael Milken story that I won't tell for the cameras, right. but I did not want to work for him. So then I came back to Rochester, and I've been doing a version of that programming back here in Rochester. And
well, let's talk about that. So, so I've been a member of your own peer groups that you did you've done since then, and you offer training and classes, which I've been a member of as well. And so, I know that. We had the president of Optimax, Joe Spillman, on the show a few weeks ago. Right. You've worked very closely with Optimax, which is now the number one in the country with precision optics, right? You've also worked with Zappos, Tony Hsieh, back in the day. So let's get now to some real strategic and practical advice for the leaders watching this. What is your secret sauce? How do you help leaders be better leaders? What are some of the things that you're doing that I know is very unique that other people are not teaching or talking about or questioning?
I knew you were going to ask that question. I knew you'd to ask a version of that question. So one of my mentors in this space is a guy named Lee Thayer. And Lee Thayer was the world's most renowned professor, academic in the field of education. Has 3 PhDs himself, engineering, music, and communication. And Thayer and I worked very closely together for a long time. We used him in a speaker. He co-designed the leadership curriculum at both Annapolis and West Point, and worked at the War College and as a professor down there for 30 years. So Lee was the real deal. Totally unknown, hardly anybody knows who Lee is. But Lee said to me one day, he says, everybody misunderstands the reason for their success and for their failures, or misinterprets the reason for their success and their failures. And one of the things that's always been kind of interesting to me is, like you and I are doing right now, a lot of these conversations stay at this level. They don't get, can you peel away the layers of the onion, right? Can you get down and can you get further and further down?
Candid conversations.
Well, can you get deeper? Can you get, can you get deeper into it? And not everybody is comfortable with those conversations. And so one of the reasons, and you alluded to this earlier, I don't like to call myself a coach is because in this day and age, the idea of a coach has gotten bastardized much more. I played basketball as a young kid, and coaches now are calling timeouts and they're doing all this thing and they're jumping up and down, and that's not coaching.
Yeah.
John Wooden was my idea of a coach. Your idea of a coach is to get the team ready to play.
Yeah.
John Wooden would sit there with his rolled up and just sit there. Rarely would he call timeout. He certainly didn't elevate his voice in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
His job was to get the team ready to play.
Yeah.
And so I view my role very much as what's necessary. What are the competencies that do they need to perform in the roles that you're asking them to play? And so there's a couple of foundational things that people don't talk about. One of them is what I just mentioned. And so I had this conversation, a guy wrote a book, and a friend of mine actually was on his podcast about, and he also knew Lee. And when Maxine died, almost 15 years ago now, I went down and led a 4-day workshop for Shell Oil 3 weeks after she passed away, and nobody in that room knew that she had passed. I went back to my room every night, cried my eyes out, got her, I can't do anything, I'll go back to the room, and then got up the next day. Nobody knew, and I got rave reviews about the performance. Foundational to what I do is the idea of role descriptions. And so we use a theatrical model, and we look at, you can think about it in terms of sports teams. Josh Allen needs to play quarterback. He has a role to play, but if the left tackle is a lousy left tackle, Josh Allen is not going to have a good day. And if the wide receiver doesn't catch the pass, when he should catch the pass, Josh Allen's not going to have a good day.
It goes back to optimizing the talent around you.
Correct, correct. And so the idea of role descriptions is what are the competencies necessary to play the role? And so if Meryl Streep has a bad day, and you've paid $500 or $800 to go see her on Broadway as a play, you are paying for the performance.
The experience of the performance, yeah.
You're paying for the performance. And so what we do is I create role descriptions for every role. What are the foundational elements for being a virtuoso in the role that you are playing? What are the success metrics around the different aspects of your roles? What's your plan for achieving those? If somebody were playing that role as a virtuoso and they were the perfect 10, where are you on the scale of being a perfect 10? What's your learning plan for how you go from here? If you're a 7, how do you go from a 7 to a 10? And then we align that with what's the role description for the organization. So one of the companies you mentioned, one of the attributes they have is they want every one of their employees to be a millionaire by the time that they get to be the age 65.
This is Optimax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know of any other company that has their goal.
Correct. Part of the philosophy is we take care of the employees will take care of the customers and that sort of thing. It doesn't necessarily work the same way everywhere, but it works there.
Yeah.
It works there. Why do you think Mike and Rick started that company?
They wanted to create a company that they would want to work at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted everything they've done there is to create a company they would have gone to work at when they were 25.
Right. Yep. And they did it.
And they did it. And so every decision that was made along the way, every role that they played, now they played their roles very differently. One was the outside person, one was the inside person. Well, you know, a lot of partnerships don't necessarily work.
Yeah.
What they did is they ceded authority and to an awful round thing, a lot of authority to them. So they played their roles effectively. Mm-hmm. So role descriptions, and I won't bore you with all the details of it, but it's a kind of a foundational thing. So when Lee Thayer and I would go and work at a company, Lee would start with the CEO. And he would get the role description for the CEO. And it would take 6 months to build the role description for the CEO. It'd drive a lot of people crazy because why we're not doing anything. But Lee would send me into the bowels of the organization. And I'd start down here. And so my affinity is at what I call the ground game. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm working with you as somebody on the line out at one of my clients, the conversation starts, tell me about your day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My conversation is not to come in and give them answers. My conversation is to meet them where they are.
With questions.
With questions. Tell me about your day.
Yeah. No, you gave me, when I was running my company, you gave me the best advice I ever had as a CEO. When I would have my one-on-ones with my reports, I would run the meeting, I would run the agenda, I would dictate, I would do most of the talking. And then you challenged me to, just ask one question in the beginning of the meeting. How can I help you? How can I serve you? How can I help you be the best you can be?
What are we not doing?
Take it from there.
What are we not doing that we should be doing?
Right.
It doesn't matter. But it starts with meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And a coach that can't do that shouldn't be coaching.
Right.
Because it's not about the coach. It's not about jumping up and down on the sidelines. It's about meeting them. Now, sometimes jumping up and down on the sidelines is the right thing to do, but not as a steady diet.
Right. Yeah.
Of things.
Yeah.
So, I took on a new assignment about 6 months ago with a client, I had dinner with the co-founders the other night, and they said to me a version of the question you just asked. They said, Bruce, how the hell did you do that? Mm. He says, the culture's changed in 6 months here. And I said, well, I didn't change it. They did. In this particular company, this happens to be a manufacturing company, been around for a long time. A lot of institutional memory in the company. Everybody I interviewed was resilient and be a wonderful employee, and you'd hire them in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. Every one of them had a negative attitude. Mm. Every one of them was doing workarounds for some of the dumbest systems I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Just killing morale.
However, the people that stayed and survived were very, very good at doing the workarounds. Mm-hmm. They cared desperately about it, but it was exhausting every day. Mm-hmm. So in my conversations and working with them, I said, I'm not going to let anybody take away the fun of working from me. Mm-hmm. What can you do? Now, I couldn't get to there, David, unless I listened to all the dumb stuff that they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What else is wrong here? What else is wrong here? What else is wrong here? You have to get to there
drilling down,
before you can get to, okay, what the hell are you going to do about it?
Right, yeah.
And so in the 6 month period of time, when the model for them is they send people to my FLP class. So I've had 35 people go through the class in the last 6-7 months. Then I do internal coaching, so I'm available for anybody who wants to sign up as a coach. So I have 2 half days inside. When people come to me now, they're coming to me, Bruce, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What are you thinking about? Why are you thinking about it? How are you prioritizing? How's that fit upstream? How's it fit downstream? How you thought about that? Who else are you talking to about it? Now all of a sudden, now I mentioned to you, to Leo a little bit earlier before we got started, because I know the CEO and I know the strategy and I know what the organization is trying to do, then I can get the ground game going. I don't stay there. They do it. But understanding the linkages between here and there is a really important thing. The other thing, which is counterintuitive, and I'll just say this, and I don't know how much longer you have with me, the companies that I have worked with that have been the most successful have never had a strategic plan.
Why is that?
It's in the way. They have a strategy. But they build in a sense of checking and adjusting or sensing and responding and make that a competency. And the company you just mentioned was magnificent at it. They haven't had a strategic plan. Now, you don't run around and tell your banker you don't have a strategic plan, by the way. You might actually get one and give it to the banker and then go do what you want to do. However, they have a strategy. We're going west. So the process and methodology that you build for sensing and responding, we're making a decision today. We think that the consequences of that decision are going to be A, B, C, or D. The appropriate time for us to check and adjust to see whether or not that decision is having the results that we think it's going to have is X. If it's wildly successful, here's what we do. If it's wildly unsuccessful, here's what we stop. Look out over the horizon, come back and make a decision. And now, for the one particular company I'm working with, we actually evaluate our decision process. When you decide to do X, David, what's your evaluation of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the actual results are going to be what you think they're going to be? 6, 7, 9. You get a group score, we get an individual score. Now we're evaluating our decision-making process.
What's it going to take to make it a 10?
And it turns, and turns it into almost a prediction market of sorts. So this look out over the horizon, come back to the now, make your choices, pull your levers, but be confident about, wait a minute, then what's the downside if it's wildly unsuccessful? What would we do? What would we do? How do you check it? So the organizations in this day and age, because of the speed and pace of change, because of the difficulty in seeing very far into the horizon, because of all the speed and pace, the ability to be almost organic about how you build and grow is a core competency. And anything that looks hierarchical, the chances are very good it's not going to work.
Interesting.
So so the combination of understanding the roles you're going to play against the process and methodology for how you do that. And if you think about it, our society is having a terrible problem with this. The speed and the pace of change, just look at AI, for instance. But our socioeconomic and business model and systems are lagging behind the speed and the pace of change. And then we get fear-driven, then we get afraid of things, and so you can see it all over our society, right? The gap between, and so now it's anxiety, it's uncertainty, and all that sort of thing. And we got a lot of that going on. So the answer to the uncertainty is not to create certainty. The answer to the uncertainty is to create a system that deals with the uncertainty.
That's good.
Which is a much more organic process. That's why I love what I do at this stage of the game, because not everybody is thinking like that.
Well, and just, to bring this to a close here, love all that. And I love that you don't have all the answers, right? A lot of coaches, gurus, they feel like they have all the answers. One great thing you taught me, in addition to asking that great question as a leader, how can I help you? How can I serve you? Is when I needed something done, I was, most leaders, including myself at the time, was very clear about exactly how I wanted it done, right? And you said, if you're hiring great people, why aren't you giving just kind of the idea of what you want, and let them put their fingerprint on it and make it great with their own expertise.
David, it's a great misunderstanding of the military. The Navy SEALs teams know the commander's intent. The commander's not telling the Navy SEALs team how to go do it.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And the Navy SEALs team has a munitions guy who's better at munitions than anybody else in the universe.
Right.
But everybody on the team knows how to back that up.
Let them paint the picture.
Yeah.
You tell them you want a painting, let them paint the picture.
And if 12 of them are on the team and 10 of them get killed, 2 of them can finish the mission.
Yeah.
So the commander's intent is clear. We're going to take that hill. How we take that hill, the way they take the hill, will depend on the context, the circumstances, and all that sort of thing.
Well, and that's good that most of the time in business, we're not getting killed, right? So we can do the same thing. Well, Bruce, we can talk for hours and hours.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming here and all
it's my pleasure, by the way.
Thank you for Maxine to bringing you here, making such a great impact and difference in Rochester. And I feel like you feel like you're still just getting started, right? A lot of work to do. So.
And some of that's because of the young people I'm working with. Young people, the people I'm working with in organizations at the work level, the ground, I call it the ground game. Those kids in this day and age are desperate for the kind of conversation that we're just having.
Yeah.
They are desperate for it.
They want the information. Yeah.
They really want to understand. But it's really important. You can't come and tell them that.
Yeah.
It has to come from them.
Right.
And then you have to create the context for how it comes out. And we always forget, people do things for their reasons, not ours.
Right. Yeah. What's in it for me, right?
People do it for their reasons. Part of the role of leadership is to understand what drives them.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Where people want to learn more, where can they go?
Well, Beyond Teal.
BeyondTeal.com.
www.beyondteal.com. Yeah. And a lot of the programs are there, and they can sign up actually to schedule a free interview with me. So, okay.
And if anybody wants a personal connection to Mr. Bruce over here, let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. I've known Bruce for a long time. Bruce,
thank you. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
My real live Mr. Miyagi.
There you go.
I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for watching another great episode of The Optimize Show. I'm Dave Amato, your host. We're here every Wednesday morning. Please go, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like, share. We're doing some great things here trying to help all the ships rise with the tide with this great content information we're putting out. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Make sure to stay awesome.